All right. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time this morning. All right. We are back at it. Before the show, I'm kind of tired. So I get back issues, and I want to get into but I have some back issues and whatnot. And sometimes it disrupts my sleep. And so this morning, I was like tired, and I was like, And then I remembered that scene from Office Space where it was like, he asked his buddy, his neighbor. So you've got the guy who works in an office, and his neighbor is a construction worker. And he asked him, he's like, does anybody ever, you ever come into work on a Monday and you're not feeling so well, and somebody asked you if you had a case of the Mondays? And then the guy was like, nah, man. I believe you get your butt kicked for saying something like that. I was trying to get that clip, and I couldn't get it this morning, but I was going to play that. So I'll just tell you about it instead, and we'll get that clip later. All right, let's get into some announcements here real quick. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to have my friend on, who I'm also highly critical of, but I'm going to have my friend on, Jeremy Kaufman. Yep, the Jeremy Kaufman from up in New Hampshire. He and I are going to talk about tech censorship in 2025. And he's no stranger to it. If you're familiar with Jeremy, he used to have, I think he developed something called Library, and he can explain it tomorrow, but he ended up being sued by, I think, the SEC. I think. I may have my facts on that incorrect. But he will be on tomorrow. We're going to talk about tech censorship and kind of like where he sees it going, what happened to him, his experience, and so on and so forth. So we talk about that. Then I was going to do it Wednesday night, but we're going to switch it till Thursday night. Karlin Borsenko is going to be on. We're going to do an evening show because not everybody gets up at the butt crack of dawn to do podcast. But Karlin has spent the last several years researching the radical left. She will join me to help distill as much as that as she can in a single hour. So that ought to be fun. We're going to talk about Antifa. We're going to talk about her perspective, what Trump's doing, what should be done, so on and so forth. So that should be a fun conversation. So look forward to that Thursday night. Last item on the agenda here for just announcements. I got to thinking about Thursday's episode. And in Thursday's episode, I kind of got pissy with the vice president and some of his rhetoric regarding the rhetoric of people. And he kind of challenged people, and on camera, I gave him the middle finger, told him, F you. All right, so look, I'm not going to pretend like Liberty Dad is not some sort of punchy kind of guy from time to time. My wife will tell you, if I get annoyed, like, you don't know what I'm going to say. However, this show is intended to at least be family friendly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work, I'm going to put the effort in to getting back to being family friendly. Now, why am I saying all this? I'm not embarrassed by being punchy about my First Amendment right or anything that I have to say. And I make no bones about telling people about it. Like, that's who I am. Sometimes I just get a punchy streak in me and I get fired up and I say what I say. And that's okay. No issues with that. When I created the show, one of my frustrations with a lot of libertarian shows is that they're not family friendly. And at the time, my son was much younger and I didn't want him repeating language before I even realized, I didn't want him to repeat certain words. And so I avoided listening to podcasts when he was a little kid, he's a little kid now, but when he was younger and just learning to talk, because I didn't want him picking up that language. And so when I decided to create this podcast, I was like, all right, I'm going to make it family friendly so that if you're in your car, you're driving your kids to work, you're listening to YouTube or, on Rumble or wherever, Facebook, whatever, that you too could listen into this. And your kids won't be interested because it's not made for kids, but at least you don't have to worry about profanities and stuff like that. So we're going to get back to that. We're going to get back to the roots. What I want you to do, hold me accountable. If I'm getting a little too punchy, you might jump in the chat and be like, DL, you might need to say, simmer down, son. It's a dad show. I mean, not really a dad show, but I'm Liberty Dad. So you could say, simmer down, son. And we're just going to kind of keep it family friendly here because I want to make sure that everybody can listen to it. And there's really if occasionally it happens, it's fine, but we're going to try not to make it like the rarity, not the regularity. So with that being said, just hold me accountable, folks, and we will keep this family friendly. All right, let's get into the show today. We're going to be talking about the DEFUND Act, which it's a long name. So it is the Disengaging Entirely from the United Nations Debacle Act, because lawmakers love their acronyms. It's like I've got this weird feeling that lawmakers spend more time coming up with clever titles than they do actually reading bills. It's just this theory I have. I don't have a lot of information to base that on, other than the fact that we keep getting bills with these clever titles, and then half the time they don't read the bills because they don't know what's in them. So I'm just kind of like taking those two things, and I'm like, that's my evidence. It's not the strongest of evidence, but it is my evidence. Anyway, this comes on the heels. Well, these were already introduced back earlier this year. So these aren't new, but they've gotten a little bit more attention since Trump's speech at the UN. So I want to play what he had to say about the UN again, and then we'll dive into talking about this bill. So here's what he had to say. Maybe. Did I get it? Oh, I got it wrong. How about this? There we go.
Not only is the UN not solving the problems it should, too often, it's actually creating new problems for us to solve. The best example is the number one political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration. It's uncontrolled. Your countries are being ruined. The United Nations is funding an assault on Western countries and their borders. In 2024, the UN budgeted $372 million in cash assistance to support an estimated 624,000 migrants journeying into the United States.
So let's pause this for a second. The UN should not be funding anything of that sort for any country. Now, I'm not talking about like, okay, DL, what does their charter say, or what is in their constitution, or, no, I'm just saying, if there's going to be an organization for which multiple countries join, they should not be funding it so that it can in turn help fund people moving from one country to the next. That in no way should be their role. I want you to think about this. If the U.S. gives money, which we do, and we'll talk about it, but if the U.S. gives money to an organization, and then that organization spends some of that money to help people migrate to the U.S., we could have done that and just cut out the middleman. If that's going to be what the money goes for, cut out the middleman. There's no need, because that's just added bureaucracy. It's unnecessary. Now, I don't think that, I think that people should be able to travel and migrate from one country to the next, and that is up to them to figure out how they do it. It should not, there should be no tax money from any country going for people moving from one country to the next. None. Shouldn't happen. Anywhere. Let's continue.
Think of that. The UN is supporting people that are illegally coming into the United States, and then we have to get them out.
Okay. I'm not a big fan of the whole deportations thing, but there is a fair point here. Let's say that he's 100% correct. I'm not fact-checking this right now, but let's just take it at face value. It does not make sense for us to give money to the UN so that the UN can then assist people to illegally come to the U.S., for us to then turn around and spend more resources to deport them, to find them, whatever it is that we do. Even if we spend the resources to give them all asylum, that's money that's being spent unnecessarily. It's like this chain of events where it's just like you keep spending money. That is absurd. Even if you support the actual policies, like that's just a waste of money. We could just, there's not much more I can say about it.
The UN also provided food, shelter, transportation, and debit cards to illegal aliens. Can you believe that?
Now, I don't know if that's true, but again, it should not be. Like debit cards? Here's some money from the United States taxpayers so that you know. Like I'm all about, I'm not quite open borders. I'm an Ellis Island style guy. And I'm all about people coming and going to different countries at their convenience with very, very limited restrictions. Okay, violent crime being one of them, communicable disease being another. I'm all about that. But again, on your own dime. You should not be paid for. You do not get debit cards. If you have a debit card, it should be your own. If some private organization wants to give out debit cards, fine. Private. Completely, 100% private. If that's where the donors of that organization are happy with their money, how it's being spent, fine. I'm okay with that. But absolutely not from government. So that it shouldn't even be a thing. Legal or illegal, doesn't matter. You do not get to hand out taxpayer money to people Because that, like, for starters, that's an incentive for them to perhaps do something that they otherwise would not have done. If you're living in a poor country and then you hear, hey, I'll get $5,000 if I go to the U.S., I'm just making up a number. Well, then there's an incentive, right? That may not have existed prior to that. So even if the idea is intended, like what they say, good intentions, right? The road to hell, paved with good intentions. Even if there's good good intentions, the incentive that you're creating distorts the actual incentive that I think should be in place. If somebody's living in a country and they've decided, you know what, I would love to go to America. Everything I see on TV is just great. I want to live there. Okay, great. That's a great incentive. Or if somebody says, hey, my home country is a disaster and I'm at threat constantly, I can't really raise my family the way I want, we're getting the heck out of here. We're going to go to America. That seems like a friendly place. Okay, great. That's a good incentive. I don't like the incentive of, okay, we're going to give you money to come here. Hey, I'm in a poor country. $5,000 US dollars is amazing amount of money to me. So I'll do something to get that money. Okay, I don't think that's a good incentive necessarily, because it doesn't necessarily bring, I think, the best people, the people that want to assimilate. So I think a free market would actually do that. And I think a private organization wouldn't just be handing out debit cards because, well, they got to get something in return, right? There's got to be some value add. Or if they were handing out debit cards, they're going to be more deliberate in who they determine gets one than necessarily the government. I mean, yeah, the government might put in, or the UN might put in some stipulations like you've got to, meet this criteria. But as we've seen, bureaucracy when it comes to government falls or it increases pretty quickly. Like the structures that they put in place to allegedly or hopefully do good things, they fall away pretty quickly. So totally object to that. And I think even if we're looking at it from the most positive direction, you can look at it and say it's still better done and accomplished in the free market.
On the way to infiltrate our southern border, millions of people came through that southern border. Just a year ago, millions and millions of people were pouring in, 25 million altogether.
That number just... How many? Okay, let's take them at face value. 25 million people came through, let's say, under false incentives. Okay, let's put it that way. 25 million people. How many of those people has this administration removed? Because that's what he ran on, right? That's part of his campaign promise. It's not that I like it, but it is a campaign promise. So I'm going to hold you accountable for it. I'm going to say, give me some numbers. Can I count it? If I can't count it, it don't count. Okay? How many of those 25 million people? Because the stories that I keep seeing, and they're not just stories from the mainstream media that we might not want to trust. These are stories from the mainstream media that the Trump administration has doubled down on, has come out, like the Abrego Garcias. They've come out and they're like, yeah, but this guy is really bad because he's part of MS-13. Okay, well, none of that was part of the original criteria for why you removed him. You removed him because I think you found somebody that was already documented in some way, and so then you went after those so that you could have your easy wins. No. I want to know how many of the 25 million people that are supposedly here, undocumented, that came under false incentives, how many of those has he removed? Because that should be what we're holding him accountable for. Okay? I don't want to hear about the person that's been here for 10, 15, 20 years that you got rid of because they showed up to their court date, right? They were going through the process and you're like, aha, we got one. No. I want to hear about this 25 million. And I'm willing to bet that he hasn't even gotten 500,000 out. I'd be willing to bet he doesn't even know or have tabs on the 500,000 of that 25 million. So just want to point that out here. Since he's making a big deal about immigration and he's making a big deal about how many came through during the Biden administration, fine. Since you're making a big deal, tell us about it. And he doesn't, because I don't think they know what they're doing. Beside the point, just wanted to go on that little tangent.
Over the 4 years of the incompetent Biden administration. And now we have it stopped, totally stopped. In fact, they're not even coming anymore because they know they can't get through. But what took place is totally unacceptable. The UN is supposed to stop invasions, not create them and not finance them.
I mean, he makes a good point. The UN, that's not their purpose. Now, what's interesting is you might say, well, DL, no, I'll hold that for later. I'll hold something for later. Let's just go right into the bill here. So let me pull this up. Let's see here. Yeah, here we go. So this bill was introduced there we go. All right, so this bill was introduced by Senator Mike Lee of Utah back in February, and then Chip Roy in the House has an accompanying bill. And so here's what it says. I love this. Look, when you're talking about representatives, if you ever call them, thank them for the press releases of their bills. They don't always do it, and sometimes the bills there's not a lot of fanfare about it, so there's maybe not a reason to do, but at least thank them for their press releases, because it's great when they actually put it together, because then I can go and see what they are saying about it, because this is Mike Lee's page on the Senate, okay? So it's his press release. So there's no misunderstanding of what his intentions are, why he did it, so on and so forth. This is great, because I like going to the primary source. If somebody introduces a bill, I want to know why they introduced the bill. What do you believe is necessary that requires this bill? So here it says, Lee introduces DEFUND Act to pull USA from UN. Let's zoom in on this so you guys can see a little better. Can I zoom in on it? There we go. All right. Senator Mike Lee has introduced the Disengaging Entirely from the United Nations Debacle Act, which calls for the United States' complete withdrawal from the United Nations. This legislation addresses grave issues of national sovereignty and fiscal accountability, which have plagued U.S. involvement in the UN. The DEFUND Act is co-sponsored by in the Senate by Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, Rick Scott of Florida. House Armed Services Committee Chairman Mike Rogers and Representative Chip Roy of Michigan and Texas, respectively, are introducing the companion bill in the House of Representatives. Here's a quote from Mike Lee. No more blank checks for the United Nations. Americans' hard-earned dollars have been funneled into initiatives that fly in the face of our values, enabling tyrants, betraying allies, and spreading bigotry. Okay, so spreading bigotry isn't a thing that any official body should do, but I'm always skeptical when people use the word bigotry, because they tend to just have too broad of a sense of the definition. So I'm not a big fan of that. Now, betraying allies, that's kind of ambiguous. Like, what does that mean? For example, Representative Thomas Massey doesn't vote on a lot of bills, particularly bills that, give out money to other countries. And people are like, oh, you're betraying our allies. So be careful, when we're reading this, or when you're hearing somebody quote, being quoted, like what you make sure that you understand like what they mean when they say that, because you may or may not disagree. Now, ultimately, I support the bill, but that doesn't necessarily mean I support all of the rhetoric around the bill. We have to be an informed citizenry. And then enabling tyrants, I do think there's some truth to that one. But again, we would have to also understand, like, what does he mean when he says tyrants? Because a lot of people say that, like, Donald Trump is a tyrant. Well, Donald Trump is not the same kind of tyrant as I would argue as, say, President Bukele over in El Salvador. I know we're supposed to like him because he's taken some of our worst criminals, but I still think he's a tyrant. And I think the evidence is very sufficient to say so. So anyway, it goes on to quote Senator Mike Lee, with the DEFUND Act, we're stepping away from this debacle. If we engage with the UN in the future, it will be on our terms with the full backing of the Senate and an ironclad escape clause. I kind of like that. Number one, I like the full backing of the Senate. We're going to talk about that more in a minute, because I think that's the appropriate place for how the Senate was designed, because the Senate is supposed to be 2 representatives from every state that represent the state as a whole. Your House are the people that represent you as a constituent. So like my representative, Rutherford, John Rutherford, he is supposed to represent me as a constituent, okay? Whereas the senators for Florida represent the state of Florida, like the entity, the state. And I think in this particular case, by saying the full backing of the Senate, I think this would be the appropriate place to say, okay, in the future, if the United States engages with an international body, it should come with the approval of the Senate, because the Senate is made up of people who represent the individual states. So I think that's quite appropriate. It goes on, quoting him saying, the United Nations has betrayed our trust time and time again, and we cannot continue to be their cash cow and undermine our own national security and interest, says, this is quoting Senator Blackburn. The DEFUND Act would stop all forms of U.S. financial support to the UN and hold this wayward organization accountable for placating Hamas terrorists and the Chinese Communist Party. Okay? Fair enough. I'm not going to get into whether or not, what the UN has done with, Hamas or other countries. Okay? I'm not going to get into that. But I do think that, yes, we should stop all forms of U.S. financial support to the UN. Like, we could have a body of people that simply get together to discuss things between countries and come up with ideas and then commit to that. You don't need money for that. You could do that for free. I know, because a lot of political parties, like the Libertarian Party, they do it for free. Maybe not such a good job. Conversation for another day. From UNRWA, actively protecting Hamas and acting against our ally Israel, delayed condemning Hamas, to China being elected to the Human Rights Council, got a point there, to the propagation of climate hysteria, also a point, covering for China's forced abortion and sterilization programs, another point. The UN's decades-old internal rot once again raises the question of why the United States is even still a member, or why we're wasting billions, indeed $12.5 billion in 2021 every year on it, said Chip Roy, Representative Chip Roy. The UN doesn't deserve one single dime of American taxpayer money or one bit of our support. We should defund it and leave immediately. I'm proud to lead this critical effort alongside Mike Lee and Mike Rogers. All right, here are the key elements. This is why we don't even have to read the bill, right? I mean, you can read the bill, and I recommend it, but this is a nice summary. I read the bill. These elements match what's in the bill. So what does it do? It repeals critical acts that bind the U.S. to the UN, such as the United Nations Participation Act of 1945 and the United Nations Headquarters Agreement Act. Like, I want you to think about this for a second. We have this body, and then we create all these acts to go along with it. We really do bind ourselves. Remember, when Washington was leaving office, he warned us about foreign entanglements. We kind of didn't listen. Kind of meaning at all. We need to get away from foreign entanglements. This is a foreign entanglement. So I agree, we should repeal these acts that bind us to the UN. We shouldn't be involved that deeply. We should always be able to be like, you know what? This no longer serves us. We're done. And it should be easy. We should, think about what we're talking about. We're talking about legislation that has to repeal other legislation so that we can get out of an international body and stop paying the money. That's ridiculous. Ceases all forms of U.S. financial support to the UN, including assessed and voluntary contributions. Totally agree with that. prohibits any U.S. involvement in UN peacekeeping operations. I totally. Where's my buttons? Where'd my noise buttons go? Where'd they go? I lost them. There it is. Yes, yes, we should not be involved in peacekeeping operations. They're not any. The UN isn't even any good at peacekeeping. I mean, it used to be like a running joke that if the UN showed up, things got worse. Partly because of the UN. Go back and look up all the stories of UN soldiers sexually assaulting people in the countries where they're supposed to be maintaining peace. Like that alone, just that one thing should be enough for us to say, you know what? No. Absolute garbage. Just that one thing. Forget the money. Money's important, don't get me wrong, folks. But if we're part of an organization that literally has soldiers assaulting people when they're supposed to be keeping the peace, that's not an organization I want to be a part of. And it's rotten right there. That alone, it's rotten. Revokes diplomatic immunity for UN officials within the United States. Yes. I'm not a big fan of diplomatic immunity in the first place. Now, if we want to make it, if we want to have diplomatic immunity with a specific country, I guess I'm not a fan of it because let's take a country that we would expect to not have problems from. Let's say Canada. I don't know. Just, like if you said Mexico, people would be like, yeah, but there's a lot of corruption in Mexico. I mean, there's corruption in every country, but I'm trying to pick some from the least or the ones that appear to be the least. Okay? At least the corruption isn't hand in hand with like cartels. Put it that way. Okay? So if a Canadian official comes over here and if they run a red light, okay, yeah, if you want immunity for that, fine. Okay? But they shouldn't really be driving. But like if something like that happens, okay. But if they come over here and they assault somebody, they commit a violent act, no. We should hold them accountable. And that should be the case in every country. Like if U.S. sends diplomats to another country, and one of our diplomats, if they run a red light or they do something minor, okay, fine, immunity for that. I'm okay with that. That's fine. We don't need to make international incidents and deal with, something minor. But if they assault somebody, hold them accountable. And if your laws, like if we send a diplomat to another country and they have very strict laws, and then our diplomat violates them, and they get punished, that's too bad. Shouldn't have done it. Should have been more mindful about the country that you were in. It's kind of like the case of, it's a very old case. Can't think of his name, but it's the young man that went to Singapore. It was like 20 years ago, and he spray painted a bunch of cars, and then he got caught, and then he was going to get caned. Like they literally take a bamboo and they fashion it together, and they literally make a cane for which they hit you with. Like it's the adult version of spanking. And it leaves like welts. It can even break the skin, I think. And I'm like, should governments be, beating up on people? They really shouldn't. However, if you go to another country and that happens to be their law and you violate that law, I'm not going to be like, man, no, he spray painted cars, but that's not a big deal. Don't hit him with a stick. I'll be like, dude, you should have known better. I mean, for starters, there's no country in the world where spray painting cars is acceptable. None. Right? So I think for rules, for laws, for which are pretty common, there should not be any immunity from when they violate, when they're an egregious act. You damage somebody's property intentionally. I don't mean like an accident. Like if you're a diplomat and you accidentally scratch somebody's car, like you're walking by and you've got some stuff in your hand and you accidentally scratch their car, like should you be punished? No. Should you be held accountable to that person? Yes, you should be. Right? Should we make a big stink of it? No, we should not. Okay? So in that sense, I'm fine with it. Pay restitution and call it a day. If you come over here and you assault somebody, you should be held accountable according to the laws of the country you're in. Plain and simple. and I hold that for citizens. You know, like I want to say the guy's name was Michael something. I don't remember. Anyway, doesn't matter. The young man who went to Singapore, he should be held accountable for his actions as a regular, everyday, average citizen. And if a diplomat comes to a country and they make some significant violation of their law, they should equally be held accountable for it. Plain and simple. Let's see. Revokes. Oh no, we read that one. Formalizes withdrawal from the World Health Organization and other UN conventions. Yeah, we should. How many bodies do we have in the United States to deal with health? We've got like the American Pediatrics, we've got the CDC, we've got the NIH, you know, we've got umpteen bodies and all kind of, you know, groups and organizations, some of them formally official, you know, as far as like part of the government, you know, like the CDC. Some of them are private institutions. We have enough. We don't need the World Health Organization. Now, if some of those people want to get together with a body called the World Health Organization and discuss things internationally without being paid, fine. I'm okay with that. And if we decide to, hey, the World Health Organization happens to be more interested in some other countries than they are the U.S. or at the expense of the U.S., then we should be able to withdraw pretty easily. Plain and simple. Set stringent conditions for any future engagement with the UN requiring Senate approval with explicit withdrawal provisions. Totally agree with that. It's like my favorite part of it. Because if we're going to be a part of an organization, we should be able to leave pretty easily. Because at the end of the day, America needs to care about America. This is literally America first, right here. You don't get any more America first than this, okay? And we should be America first. And every other country should be that country first. If Germany is part of the UN and they decide this is no longer mutually beneficial, they should be able to say, we're done. Finish up any commitments that you've made. You know, if you said, hey, we're going to commit, you know, to this thing, you know, this particular action, you know, follow up with those, or maybe don't. I don't know. You know, I say you should, you know, follow through with your obligations, but I don't. But I think you should be able to leave the organization pretty easily, you know. So I totally support this, and I think other countries should also have a clause in their country that says, hey, these are the conditions under which we will participate with this group, and these are the requirements. Like, you know, maybe they don't have a Senate, but maybe they have something else in its place. All right. The introduction of the DEFUND Act comes in response to years of unchecked bureaucratic expansion and financial misuse by the UN at the expense of American taxpayers. Senator Lee's legislation reflects his commitment to upholding the ideals of fiscal responsibility and self-determination that are the bedrock of the United States. Totally agree. So he's totally right. This is basically, you've done the bill review. Now, if you wanted to see here's the one pager that he made, which is basically what I read. Here's the bill. Here's the text of the bill. I'll show you what the text says. Okay, HR 1498. Here you go. Right. It's about 2 pages. I didn't check into it specifically, but it's about 2 pages. Okay. Right. So here the short title: Repeal of the United Nations Participation Act of 1945, Repeal of United Nations Headquarters Agreement Act, United States assessed and voluntary contributions to the United Nations, United Nations peacekeeping operations, and and withdrawal of United Nations presence in facilities of the government of the United States, and repeal of diplomatic immunity, repeal of United States participation in the World Health Organization, repeal of involvement in United Nations conventions and agreements, prohibition on United States reentry into United Nations, notification. That's it. That's your bill. Basically everything we just saw. Now, I will point out this. Who are your co-sponsors? We've got co-sponsors here. Let's see. Let's organize this by state. So we've got Mike Rogers out of Alabama, Elijah Crane, Arizona, Randy Fine out of Florida. There's not very many things that Randy Fine will get my approval of. This is one of them. So Representative Fine, I'm not sorry at all for all the criticism that I've given you for everything else, but I will give you the kudos here. Good job. Anna Paulina, also from Florida. Jimmy Petronas, Florida. Out of Georgia. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Idaho, Fulcher. Thomas Massey out of Kentucky. If I see Thomas Massey's name, we'll make it a little bigger. If I see Thomas Massey's name on a list supporting something, like I still read it because I may disagree with him, but it's a hell of a good sign. All right, so let's see. Thomas Massey, Virginia Fox out of North Carolina, Michael Ruley out of Ohio, Josh Breachin out of Oklahoma, Diana Harshbarger out of Tennessee, Burgess Owens out of Utah, and then Harriet Hagman out of Wyoming. So if I did not read your representative, you probably ought to call them and tell them, support the DEFUND Act of 2025 introduced by Chip Roy of Texas. That's who you do. And there were some co-sponsors here. No, I'm sorry. Yeah. Not sure what I was thinking there. Sorry. All right. So there's that. Now you might say, TL, is there any evidence that's not right wing, that maybe the UN is not so good? Well, the UN. There is the UN. Here's their press release for November 11th, 2024. General Assembly expresses dismay at Security Council failure to maintain peace amid raging conflicts, stressing need for urgent reform to the body. The UN is telling you that the UN has failed. Speakers, make this a little bit bigger here. We want to make sure that you could read this. Speakers at the General Assembly today called for reforms to the Security Council's constitution, representation, and veto use, urging a renewed commitment to the adopted Pact for the Future, which itself should serve as a springboard to achieve these aims. If you need reform, if you need to reform your entire constitution, like perhaps your body is so dysfunctional that it shouldn't exist. I'm just saying, this was created partly for this purpose. Then they failed at it to the point where their own body's like, we need to reform this whole thing. It goes on. It's talking about, who's it talking about here? The Assembly Vice President, speaking for Cameroon, he expressed regret at the organ's inability to maintain international peace and security amid raging conflicts worldwide, describing the General Assembly's intervention in pressing issues as untenable, underscoring that the Pact for the Future offers a solid foundation for advancing Security Council reform, especially in making it more representative by addressing the historical injustice against Africa and improving representation of underrepresented and unrepresented regions and groups. He urged member states to follow through with ambition and determination. The UN is admitting that they suck. Do you need any more evidence? And this is from 2024. It's not like it's from 10 years ago and they got their act together since then. Is there anything else useful in here? I don't think there is. Singapore's delegate lamented that 61 member states, more than 50 of which are small states, have never served on the council, which has not been reformed in 61 years. While his delegation supports expansion in both permanent and non-permanent membership, it does not support giving new permanent members the right of the veto. They can't even figure out which countries should be there, should have a veto. They got a lot of work to do before we should be worrying about funding the UN or for the UN to come in and try and resolve anything related to any conflict whatsoever. Like, it's a disaster. How about this? How much does the U.S. fund the United Nations? This was last updated September 25th. Okay? The United States has historically been the largest donor since the body's founding in 1945. Mandatory contributions fund administrative and operational costs and are the primary source of funding for the UN's regular budget. Many member countries also make voluntary contributions to specific UN programs. President Trump has frozen or cut U.S. funding to the United Nations after criticizing the organ's inability to solve global conflicts and the disparity in financial contributions among wealthier countries. Okay? Let's see what we got here. The United States, I messed it up there. The United States remains the largest donor to the United Nations today. In 2025, it was responsible for 22% of the UN regular budget, which finances the day-to-day operations of the organization and its primary activities, and approximately 26% of the UN peacekeeping budget. Since the outset of the second term, however, President Donald Trump has made significant cuts to U.S. funding, as he did in the first term. He is also reducing U.S. engagement due to what he says is the United Nations' inability to solve global conflicts, certain agencies' politically divisive agendas, and the disparity in financial contributions among wealthier countries. I mean, yes, we should. All 193 members of the United Nations are required to make payments to certain parts of the organization as a condition of membership, per the UN Charter. The amount each member must pay annually, known as its assessed contribution, varies widely and is determined by a formula that considers their gross national income, debt burden, and population, among other factors. Goes down here. However, many member states have fallen behind on their payments. As of April 30th, 2025, cumulative unpaid assessments to the regular budget totaled $2.4 billion. The UN has mandatory payments from 193 countries. However, their payments are behind by $2.4 billion. Of that, the United States owes about $1.5 billion, so almost a little more than half. Okay? Other major debtors include China, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. Yeah, this organization is basically defunct. We just haven't figured it out yet. This is crazy. In 2025, the U.S. assessment of the UN regular budget was 22% or more than $820 million of the approved $3.72 billion total. This is an increase of nearly $58 million from the previous year and a significant rise from 1994, when the United States was responsible for only about $300 million, or 25% of roughly $1.06 billion total. That's crazy. Like, think about it. That's a lot of money. Separately, the United Nations fiscal year 2025-2026 peacekeeping budget was roughly $5.4 billion. What do we get? And now you might say, okay, well, we've got the war in Ukraine, we've got the Middle East conflict, but then you've got conflicts in Africa, you've got conflicts in other countries. What is the world getting for $5.5 billion? It certainly isn't peace. Remember, this is their peacekeeping budget. They're not keeping the peace. Remember Rwanda? They did a crap job there. I caught myself. I almost said it. They did a crap job there, right? The Hutu and the Tutsis were at war with the Tutsis on the losing end, slaughtered. UN basically did nothing about it, right? I mean, did they do some things? Yes. Did they do anything significant worth boasting about? Absolutely not. Thousands of people lost their lives. Ridiculous. So, yeah, we're not getting what we're paying for. So, we should stop paying for it. Period. Tell me if I'm wrong in the chat. But from what I can tell, the U.S. is just paying billions of dollars, if we're paying it even at all. The UN can't figure out, you know, they want to talk about reforming their constitution because there's gripes about how various countries are involved or not involved, what power they have, you know, is part of the body. Then we've got our peacekeeping arm, which isn't keeping the peace, but they've got a budget of $5.5 billion. No, that money would be better off back with the citizens. I know we're not going to get it, but this is a start, right? And what I mean by we're not going to get it, like when we cut off these organizations, half the time we kind of don't really cut them off. We just kind of say we do, maybe shuffle some things around. We reorg it. Department of Education, anyone? Oh yeah, you thought that was gone? No, it's not. Remember when Elon tweeted out and he was like, the website is gone. Website's back up. You can go check it out. It's there. We still have a Department of Education. I mean, it may be neutered, but it's basically still there. So, you know, but this goes towards that. So start cutting. And then hopefully the American people will get a taste for it. And then we'll really insist on our leadership really doing it. Really get rid of it. But first and foremost, we got to talk about this. We got to say, hey, look, what are we getting for this organization? Are we getting anything out of it? Look, I don't care about the escalator that Trump is whining about. I don't care about the fact that their teleprompter wasn't working. I don't think those were attacks on Trump, right? I don't care about those. But I do care about the billions that are being spent and what the heck are we even getting for it? Are lives being preserved in any meaningful way? Or are we just sending people to collect a paycheck and perhaps even assault the inhabitants there? No, I don't want that. We can do nothing for free. We can send our leadership to go sit at a big round table with other leadership for free, and they can also accomplish nothing. So go do that. If you're not, like, if they could come back, if the UN could come back and say, look, here's the integral part that we played in this conflict here, and it was about to get way worse, and our troops stopped it, or, you know, we negotiated a peace deal, whatever. Like, if they could come forward and say, here are the conflicts for which we unambiguously, very clearly, without a shadow of doubt, we had a hand in resolving, then I might be more willing to say, okay, let's talk about how we engage in this. Let's talk about a better way to do this, right? I might be willing, you know, I don't like the idea of us paying taxes, but if we were at least getting something out of it, you would at least make the argument for me harder to make. If nothing else, even if I decided at the end of the day, nope, our tax money shouldn't go for that, which I probably would, right? But there's a small chance that I would say, oh, you are actually having an effect. Maybe this is one of those edge cases where taxation is theft, but we are at least getting something, what we're expecting to get out of it. But time and time again, our tax money, we're not getting what we're supposed to get out of it. So stop taking it. Give it back. Because you're not even delivering. I want results. What did I say? If I can't count it, it don't count. And when I look, what I count are failures. So stop spending money. All right. That's basically what I got. I support this bill 100%. I think you should support it as well. If after we get rid of the UN, dissolve it entirely, if then countries want to come together and create a body where that's not getting paid, if they want to create a body to sit down and discuss things, that's fine. Right? Like, I'm okay with American diplomats sitting down with German diplomats and diplomats from various countries in Africa and from Japan and wherever else and saying, what kind of problems are you dealing with? What kind of problems are we dealing with? What problems might be shared? Right? Like when you had the pandemic, that was a shared problem. Okay, what are you guys doing? What might we do? Right? Whatever. Not lockdowns, but the point being, like, I think there's a value add in entities sitting down and having a discussion and saying, here's what we're doing. No, here's what we're doing. This will work in our country. This will not work in our country. That's fine, right? But for right now, as far as I can tell, the UN, trash. Get rid of it. Let's see what you guys are saying in the chat. Where are we? 827? Let's see what you guys are saying in the chat. You guys are up there. Let's see here. Good morning to you, Time Surfing. Glad you could make it again. Let's see. I'm just tired of seeing our taxes flowing out of the country where there are plenty of problems here at home that need addressed. Absolutely. Like on top of the fact that our money is going out to an entity that's not even accomplishing what its main role is for. Like it has they call it organs. They have these arms, these entities, like the peacekeeping organ of it, and they're not even helping keep peace. Like have they made any advancements in the Middle East? None. So, like, then you add on top of it, we have a lot of problems here at home that this money could be going for. Now, again, I'm of the variant that says taxation is theft. But if you want to make the argument tough for me to make, politicians, deliver results. Deliver results and say, yeah, that DL guy, he talks a lot of noise about taxation is theft and you should get to keep all of your money and we should defund pretty much the entire government. But here, let me show you some results that we've been delivering. Some tangible, unambiguous, very clear, even our opponents have to admit, results. Do that for a change. Make me eat my words. But you're not, you know? So I don't want to fund foreign entities. And then we've got issues here at home that we can deal with. And if we take, I know we're not going to get that money back. You know, the tax money's going to, let's be honest, we're not getting that money back. So at least stop paying for that and try to find something at home that you can deliver on. Or, best case scenario, in my opinion, just give it back. Just stop taking it in the first place. Because you're not going to deliver at home either. Like, look, if you're a representative and you're watching, you know it. I know it. The audience who are not members, you know, not elected representatives, they all know it. We all know it. Let's just say it. Let's move on. Give us our money back. How about that? Let's see. Yeah. Come in the right way or don't come. I agree. I just think the right way should be a lot easier. Talking about immigration, by the way. I agree. But I think the right way needs to be a lot less complex. I've shown it before. There's like that huge process map that shows like go this way, and this. Like it's very complicated. Our asylum process is just it's terrible. Like the reason that a lot of people join, try to go through the asylum process is because that's one of the easiest ways for them. There are strict requirements in order for you to be able to claim asylum. But the problem is once you claim asylum, like then it's a matter of evaluating all your evidence, and we have so many people that are claiming asylum that we have a backlog of potential asylees. So yeah, our process is just ridiculously convoluted. Let's see. My VA lady says, I'm late. Good morning. Good Monday morning, Liberty Champions. Good morning to you. No big deal. If the audience or those assisting with the channel are late. If I'm late though, stand on my neck. Let's see here. Yeah, we'll end it here. Check out Liberty Dad's link tree where you can find all his links, including Patreon and buy DL a coffee. So yeah, go to those. Help out the channel. You know, you might be wondering like, okay, since DL, you're over here harping on tax money and what is it going for? I'm not going to go into all the details, but I'll just tell you, virtually everything is a subscription out there. So if I need information, probably need a subscription, right? And so I pay for a lot of things. And so the money that you give through Patreon or buy me a coffee, they go toward me being able to buy better equipment so that I can, deliver a nicer looking show, keep pace with all the big dogs out there, right? They go toward me buying subscriptions so that I can have access to the information that I need so that I can present it to you and help you become more informed. So yeah, there's a lot going on. Any kind of video editing I need, subscription. Like everything's subscription based, okay? So, and then perhaps I'll get a coffee while we're at it. Because it is, buy me a coffee. So I should at least buy a coffee from time to time and say, thanks, folks. This is not coffee, but thanks. Get over there. Thanks, folks. So do that. Go to the link tree. It's in the show notes. Linktree/LibertyDad, all one word. Check it out. Help me out. But let's say for the moment that money's tight on you, because I get it. The government has taken a lot of money from you so they can give it to the UN so that it can waste it. That's money that could be going toward me, but hey, it's gone. You don't have it. Just promote the show. Let people know. Say, hey man, you got to check out this Liberty Dad show. If you got the time, clip an episode or, clip something from the episode, spread it around on social media, tag me. I'll retweet it, repost it, whatever, right? Those are the things that you can do to help this show, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is create the best libertarian show out there. That's my goal. I'm not going to stop until people say Liberty Dad Show is the #1 libertarian show ever, anywhere. #1. That's my goal. So you can help me get there, folks. All right. Remember, just one more thing. I want to remind you guys, tomorrow morning, Jeremy Kaufman, he'll be on the show. We're going to talk about tech censorship in 2025, talk about some of the latest that's been happening. Like YouTube came out and they pretended to say like, hey, we're going to restore a bunch of accounts. And then people went to try to get accounts and then they were banned immediately. And then YouTube was like, well, we've got this new pilot program that we're going to be talking about, that kind of thing, what you can expect and whatnot. And then again, Thursday night, not Wednesday night, which I initially tongue-tied. Not Wednesday night, which I initially intended, but Thursday night, I will have Karlin Brosenko on. We're going to talk about the radical left. These are the Antifa folks. These are the ones that are going to go out and commit violence. They are the revolutionaries. They are a danger. She's going to tell us all about them. That is Thursday night, because she's more of a night owl, so I couldn't get her up early for the show. So I will stay up late. But with that, I will see you guys tomorrow. So have a good one.